MC5 is such a band that I feel like everybody is influenced by. Like every single band that I love can look back and say that MC5 is like one of the especially this record in general is like a starting off point from them. I mean, just reading about it, it's like to see that they were like the band before the Stooges that kind of set up the Stooges. And then I hear this record and I listen to the Stooges. I'm like, oh yeah, that totally makes sense. You any thoughts on that, Kimmy?
Um,
Kim's back. We got Kim again, dude.
where was I?
I don't know. Who knows, dude? He's doing rock and roll shit. Well, before we get into that, how was the Taylor Hawkins memorial? Because I wish I could have been there. It looked incredible.
It was bittersweet. It was, there are aspects that were, certainly contemplative and reflective, and there are aspects that were, a little bit nerve wracking because you want to do the best you can. Here I'm playing a song that I've played once in 5 years that
Yeah.
has particular sentimental context for Matt and myself and Ben. And at the same time, you want to be part of the celebration, and so you're trying to balance, positive sentiments with sort of these more, I guess maybe not morose, but just melancholy.
Yeah.
And at the same time, having to play these songs and familiarize yourself, refamiliarize yourself, do them right, and at the same time experience the heaviness that might be for you and in my case, my Soundgarden brethren.
Yeah.
So it was, but I think overall, after a couple of beers, I think the celebratory nature started
Kick it in.
Yeah.
What did you guys play? I didn't somebody the guy that directed it actually directed my TV show, Joel Gallen, and he sent me a set list and then I looked at it quickly and I've been so busy the last few days. What did you guys end up playing?
We played The Day I Tried to Live and
Oh,
Black Hole Sun. And so Matt and I played with 4 people that we'd never played those, songs with before. Taylor Momsen sang, and she did a great job, man. She
yeah.
nailed it. It was powerful. Her pitching was great. I mean, Chris is one of the best singers, in rock
Ever.
ever.
Yeah.
And I'd probably say that about Taylor Momsen, the fact that she nailed some of our stronger songs vocally. And then Chris Novosel's played bass.
Nice.
And Matt and Chris and I have been playing together with The Third Secret, so we kind of had some familiarity with playing with each other, but we hadn't really done Soundgarden songs. And then of course Dave and Pat Smear. The song is strong on its own with the chords and the vocal phrasing and the melody, but the recording itself has a lot of different guitar colors and effects and production stuff that sometimes annoys me. It could be too much. It's what makes Kick Out the Jam so great. There isn't any. There's almost none of that.
None of that. It's raw.
Exactly.
Did you get rehearsal when did you guys have like get together during the day? I'm assuming you did, right? You had to.
So we did the day before.
Okay.
So Matt had been on tour with Pearl Jam.
I know. I just saw them. I just saw them at Madison Square Garden.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's just such a fun show. It's like, I mean, I was on mushrooms, so I will say this, but when they kicked it into Porch, it felt like Madison Square Garden was literally moving. It could have been the drugs, but it could have been the energy that they're putting off. And I think like it's so great to see Matt playing with them and they just gel so great and keep that Seattle sound like spirit alive.
He brings them, up here. I mean, they could be a really good garage band, and then you get Matt, and he can anticipate. He reads other players really well, and he anticipates where they're going. So that means rather than a jam meandering, it's like becomes this really cool thing.
Yeah.
And he's really the difference between Matt playing with Pearl Jam and some of the drummers they used before is significantly ascended in their ability to to be the kind of band they are, which is, you know, they're powerful, they're earnest, and they do have this jammy raw garage band thing to them. And
Yeah.
Matt can really make that sound, you know, just super, you know, really professional at the same time being bringing out the elements of five guys who enjoy playing the music together. You know?
Oh, for sure. And you could tell, man, he's having fun. And they're a band that like really does seem like you said, it's like they're like rock and roll fish. I know that sounds weird, but their fans are just. I met the producer of one of my radio shows has seen them 88 times live, and you're just like people are going and traveling to follow them. And I've seen them a couple times, and I did a festival with them. I did Bonnaroo, and then I saw them in LA, and then I went on a whim. I think it was 2 Sundays ago, and I was like, I'm never going to miss a Pearl Jam show in my area ever. That was so much fun.
It's
So
definitely an evening, you know, like you said, like the Dead
yeah,
or Fish. It's yeah, exactly. They're kind of playing with you and not at you, you know,
exactly,
sort of playing
exactly.
for you. And yeah, they are really good that way. You know, Matt and I were talking about this, about the different elements of Soundgarden, and Matt certainly brought maybe that kind of professionalism as an ability, and his ability to read, uh, you know, a little bit. Well, and this relates to the MC5 in that element that's a little bit looser and spontaneous and wild. Uh, Certainly, those components are present with Ben and myself, and they were there with Hiro Yamamoto, and sometimes with Chris. But Matt's ability to read other players and anticipate where they're going keeps it together and makes it
Yeah,
really
brings
good
it
at
in.
another
Yeah, yeah,
level.
yeah.
Otherwise, we'd just be a band falling down the stairs, you know.
Yeah, but that
And
would rule, dude. I'd love to hear Soundgarden falling down the stairs, dude. That would
just
rule.
isolate my guitar solos. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah. Just go, dude. Just go. All right, MC5. Let's get into this. We have so much to talk about, and I'm so glad you're back, man. And I'm glad you're back doing a record that I mean, I know you've jammed with them, and we'll get into all of that, but take me back. Like you know, when did you first hear of the MC5? How did you get into them? What was it like? All the experiences. Take me from the start.
Um, I'm
I love
trying.
the angles with you. I see below you,
The
I see
camera's
above
kind of
you.
below me. It looks weird. You know what they say about selfies? You know, always up.
Always up, dude. But I feel like I'm zooming with my spiritual guide right now. It's like I'm present,
Yeah.
I am here, I have my crystals over there.
Oddly, and I can remember this pretty clearly, which is kind of strange. But my introduction to hard rock would have been something like Day Tripper by the Beatles, right? Or Come Together or Helter Skelter. But I love Day Tripper, you know, things like
Great
that. I
song.
Feel Fine with Feedback, you know, one of the first recordings of Feedback. I
Yeah.
thought, what does that sound at the beginning? Yeah,
Oh,
so eventually, when you listen to the radio, you know, the songs you like are things like Elton John, Chicago. That's what you hear on Top 40 radio in the early and mid 70s. And then I hear the song Rock Roll All Night. And I go, and that's cool. And I go look for that album in the record racks. And I had no idea what these guys looked like. I just loved the song Rock Roll All Night. I thought it was Bachman Turner Overdrive, actually. And then I heard the DJ say it was Kiss. And I went and looked for the album at Lowe's Records.
yeah.
And I looked at that and I go, what is this? And it was like Alice Cooper and David Bowie, only you know, a bunch of them. And I bought the album, cool pictures, and more 3-chord hard rock.
Yeah.
And I love that band. So I'd read about Kiss, you know, just I'm sure like a lot of kids did, get every magazine that had pictures of Kiss in it, like Circus and Hit Parader and Cream. But Cream had some cool writing. You know, they had Lester Bangs and stuff
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So they would write about Kiss and they would talk about bands like the New York Dolls. And they'd say, you know, that kind of, you know, the poofed hair, the makeup. And they would talk about the MC5 and the Stooges, these Detroit bands that had that kind of simple 3-chord power. And I thought, this is interesting. I've never heard of these bands.
Mhm.
And I couldn't find their records. They're all out of print. Mid 70s, New York Dolls, MC5, Stooges, all out of print. Then punk rock happens, 76, 77,
Hmm.
and the Pistols get all this news attention. So I'm hearing about punk rock from TV more than I am from radio, because radio isn't playing it. And I think this is cool. It's aggressive. The chords are distorted, 3 chords, just like I learned to love with Kiss. Um, and I start getting to punk rock. When I start reading about punk rock in Cream or whatever, again the references to the MC5 and the Stooges as being these proto-punk, you know, um, uh, the progenitors of punk rock. So I thought,
Yeah.
okay, where can I get these? Go to record stores. The guy would look it up in the catalog. Oh, they're out of print. So I eventually have a friend's big brother direct me to used record stores. Go to a used record store and I find Kick Out the Jams. I buy it because I want to hear about this band that somehow is influencing punk rock, but then also influenced this band Kiss that appealed to my teenage sensibilities.
Yeah.
Um, and I hear Kick Out the Jams. Actually, it took a while for me to buy the album because I needed money and I was too young, and I had to save up lunch money. I had to like not eat lunch at school for like a week or two, and at the end of a week or two, I can go buy an album.
Yeah. How much are albums back then? Just to give me an idea. I want to know because mine were like
I
18. They were $5. I feel like everything was either 10.99 or $18. And I when I was really, really getting into tapes, because I never really got records. It was tapes and then
yeah,
eventually
yeah.
CDs.
This would have been mid to late 70s, and records could have been anywhere from $4.99 to six something. So school lunch was 50 cents a day,
Hmm.
10 days, and I'm in an album.
Yeah, we used to do that with cigarettes too. It was like we'd go around Germantown Commons and ask people, "Can I borrow 25 cents so I can call my parents so they can pick me up?" And they'd be like, "Yeah." And then we'd just get our 2.25 and we'd buy a pack of Marlboro Reds and we'd share
Wow,
it.
in the late 70s, you can get cigarettes in Chicago for 75 cents.
What?
That's pretty crazy. 2.25, I remember that too. That
But
would have been
then
in the 80s, right?
in New York, I don't smoke anymore, but I think they're about 15, 16 a pack right now.
Wow.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
that's
I
even that.
quit smoking a few years ago.
Yeah, good for
Definitely.
us. I vape, which I need to stop. Probably worse, but I like I inhale like a Fruit Loop cereal milk flavor into my lungs, and it's not that bad. It's enjoyable. All right, so you were saying, so you save up for the record, and what did you get? You got Kick Out the Jams at the used record
Yeah, but
store?
before that,
Yeah.
so I can't hear the record. It's not on radio. It's not on TV. I can't afford it yet, but I know where it is or whatever. Um, in my, I was in an alternative school program, not the one where you're, I mean, not the one where here's your last chance to stay in school. It
Yeah.
was kind of a progressive program, not that unlike Evergreen State College in Olympia, Washington, where you a town and a college culture which generated bands like Beat Happening and Nirvana and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So our high school is kind of like that. A lot of graduates of that high school end up moving to Olympia, Washington. But we had a room that had a 4 square court, like just some guys that put some tape on the floor, and it was kind of like the gym, but it had like books and records in it, and people donated their albums and their books. It was kind of like a library gym. And I go in there and look at the records, and it was all Grateful Dead, like Terrapin Station, blah, blah. There's kind of like a smart hippie vibe to it, and
Yeah.
maybe a little bit of a juvenile delinquent thing. A lot of Utopia, Todd Rundgren, and Grateful Dead, and I could listen to a few Utopia songs, if they had a cool guitar part.
Sure.
There's an album called Heavy Metal. It was a compilation, and on it had Alice Cooper, Vanilla Fudge, Steppenwolf. I like that song, Born to Be Wild. You can actually hear that on the radio all the time. And then I had the MC5 Kick Out the Jams. So here it is. The band I've been reading about, the band whose record I can't find. And I just go to listen to that song, and boom, it was powerful. It was 3 chords. It was crazy. It sounded like, it was wild. It was chaotic. It was just had all this energy and heaviness. And I thought, heavy metal, huh? I like this. I like heavy metal. That's what I'm into. And it was my favorite song on the album. And, you know, it had great tracks on it, from Deep Purple and Alice Cooper and everything, Steppenwolf. I liked that song. And then eventually I saved up my lunch money for a couple of weeks and got to buy it. And then I had some friend's big brother point out to me that, oh, that's not the original release. It doesn't have the liner notes from John Sinclair. I go, liner notes, so do I need that? He goes, yeah, he talks about kicking out the jams, motherfuckers, and dope guns and like fucking in the streets. I'm like, that'd be cool to get. And also they edited the track, Kick Out the Jams. It's supposed to say kick out the jams, motherfuckers. But your version says kick out the jams, brothers and sisters. So that's lame. You gotta find that.
That is lame. Yeah, dude.
So my search began again. And and I had to abstain from lunch for another 2 weeks.
You're just getting emaciated. just everybody's like, is everything all right with Kim? Should we contact Child Protective Services? I feel like he hasn't eaten in months. You're on a hunger strike. So you say, did you save up? Did you finally get the edited version? How long did that take?
No, I got the unedited version. Yeah. That probably it may have been another year, because I got the gist of this album, and I still need to explore other MC5 albums and Stooges. I was still looking for. I think the first Stooges album I got was Funhouse, but eventually I think I got a job, and after I saved up to buy an amp, the rest of the money went to, I think I was able to find a record store that did trade-ins, you know, probably that used store, and I found the copy that had the Kick Out the Jams, motherfuckers. I traded it in and worked out.
So because I just don't know, because like I'm born in '79, punk had already been out by the time I really started getting into music. And like I think I said on the last one, it's like I immediately really jumped into music with like Maiden, just because of the imagery, and I thought it was cool. And then Guns N' Roses was when it really took off. So I missed the whole punk movement. So for this, for someone that's already digging on what punk is doing, like how important are these bands to everything else? Because it's like there's to see and hear the influences that you mentioned before. I mean, is this, without this band, is there no Sex Pistols? Is there no Minor Threat? You know what I mean?
There definitely is no Sex Pistols without the New York Dolls. I mean, there is a musical lineage between the Dolls and the Sex Pistols. It's what's interesting about that is that 80s Hollywood glam metal, they often cite the Dolls as part of their lineage. And I think when you talk about the hairspray and the poofed hair and the spandex, and there's definitely a tie from the Dolls to 80s LA glam.
Yeah.
That's mostly about the look and the attitude. But the that kind of slashing, punky, dirty, grimy musical tradition. And there's other connections too. If you listen to Steve Jones' guitar solos, it's very inspired by Johnny Thunders and the Dolls. And they shared Malcolm McLaren. McLaren, I believe at some point he'd worked with the Dolls. I think he managed them. Then he ended up back in England and was managing the Pistols, right? Got them together. But he had worked with the Dolls, went back to England, worked with the Pistols, and you can kind of see that he probably had them listen to In Too Much Too Soon and
Sure.
And the first Dolls album. There's definitely a thing there if you listen to the first Dolls album, the Pistols. And as a matter of fact, I think Johnny Thunders, the lead guitarist of the Dolls, and the Heartbreakers were on that Anarchy in the UK tour, right? So that was what, the Pistols, the Clash.
Oh wow!
I think it was the Heartbreakers, or maybe the Voidoids, but I think it was the Heartbreakers. So, and that was the American band that was on it. I believe it was the Heartbreakers. If my memory is serving correct, there is some connection there. I know the Voidoids, Richard Hell played with Johnny Thunders, and he was in the Heartbreakers too. So there could be some conflation going on.
Sure.
But so cool.
So what I was going to say is like, because for a lot of people, especially, I'm not going to talk about Gen Z. I'm just talking about people my age. A lot of people don't know who MC5 is. They kind of remain this like deep cut. Uh, but they're almost essential listening as a music fan
Yeah,
of so much shit. So they're like we call this like Dave Attell is like a comics comic. Like
yeah,
MC5 is like a band's band.
yeah,
Why? Why are they
exactly.
so highly regarded by musicians?
They preceded and influenced heavy metal and punk rock and even Bruce Springsteen. And that's a little sideways one, but the what is it? Here, I don't look this up. The
No, go
guy
ahead.
who produced a lot of Springsteen records. I think
Oh shit, I know it because I was just fucking. He just came out with a book. John Landau. Is it?
yeah, it's Landau. Um,
Yeah, dude, I was right.
I think
this,
that's
this podcast's working.
I think he produced back in the USA the second MC5 album. Let me look it up. Uh,
Let me see if I have any of the facts because I got a bunch of shit here. I got their. So this is the produced this the second MC5 back in the USA. I think it was John Landau because we already did that record. Yeah, it
yeah,
was,
John
dude.
Landau.
I
Yep,
rule.
yep.
I rule.
Right on.
Dude, this is
So,
making me a music aficionado guy. Like
so
it's crazy.
he produced that second album
Yeah.
and produced a bunch of Springsteen, right? And I
Yes.
think he's involved in some of the writing and arranging. There's a song on MC5's second album, back in the USA. The song is called "Shaking Street." It's
Yeah.
written by Fred Sonic Smith, the one of the two great guitarists of the MC5, and
Uh-huh.
it's sung by him. So they have a lead singer, Rob Tyner, and they get Fred Sonic Smith sings his song, and the voice sounds different, and the lyrics. Just check out the lyrics for that. It's got a lot of street nicknames for characters. Like I don't know, Turkey Neck Sue, Rubber Pencil Joe, things like that. And that's also very Springsteen like. Just street nicknames. And that song has a lot of that. It's got this kind of bell like shimmer to some of the instrumentation and the production, which is also very Springsteen like. It makes me think of like Born to Run or Asbury Park. And I think that's a Landau connection. I think specifically with that song, there's a component to it that's very street, which is very punk, but it's also very Springsteen, street, neighborhood, things like that. And I think this is why the MC5 is important, because they connected to so many things. And yeah, I mean, listen to their second album, that song "Shaking Street," and it's like, yeah, this could be. I can't believe Springsteen didn't do it, and he probably did. He probably did cover it sometime.
Yeah.
But yeah, before that first MC5 album came out, what, 68, 69, and there've been some heavy stuff. There've been Zeppelin and everything, but Zeppelin was kind of more of this heavy arena blues thing. The
Hmm.
term heavy metal was kind of loose. I mean, when Sabbath came out, uh, they were referred to as acid rock and not heavy metal. It kind of took a while for that term to sit in. But the MC5 playing around in the mid to late 60s, definitely that heaviness and the wildness connected, the sort of wildness and the street level lyrics connected to punk, and some of the heaviness and some of the uh, elements of musical proficiency they showed in later albums are kind of metal-like. Um, so that's why I think they're really important in guitar rock, and they're often cited by hard rock guitarists and metal and punk guys. So they're very
But
important for that. I can't believe they're not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but there is a difference from what journalists understand about rock music and what musicians understand about rock music.
for sure, for sure. I mean, there's so many bands that should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. There's
Yeah.
so many. But
But you
this
want
is
to know
what.
about rock? Definitely ask a rock player or guitarist.
Oh, this is I mean, we did this record. We did this record. We did. Was it Born in the USA? Then not Born in the USA. Whatever. The Back in the USA. We did
Yeah.
that a few months ago, and that was my introduction. I remember listening to that and being like, yeah, this is a good rock and roll record, but it still didn't make sense to me of why this, because it didn't have the power and the rawness
Yeah,
of this record. Now, you mentioned heavy metal. I don't think I would consider this. You said Sabbath. Sabbath is heavy metal in my interpretation of what
yeah,
heavy metal is. I
yeah,
don't think this is just like, this is almost like, because even dude, they covered a Chuck Berry song on Back in the USA.
yeah.
So it's just like old school rock and roll, the original fucking Sun Records type shit, but just faster and with,
More
the
distorted,
grunge.
heavier.
Yeah.
Well, if you're, yeah, I guess if you're cutting your teeth on Iron Maiden and you go back and hear Back in USA, yeah, it may not seem metal like. By the way, Maiden played Seattle last night. My girlfriend went to the show.
Really?
Yeah,
Flamethrower arm. Did she talk about that? He comes
yeah.
out. He's like, once
Sent
it's
me,
even
sent me a video of Eddie on this, coming out on stage. But yeah, but see, so I didn't have to go back as far. There's yet to be a Maiden or Priest. So the punk rock's coming out, and I could see the connection there. A song like Call Me Animal to me was very heavy, just in groove and rhythm. And then the song High School, it's in the movie, it's in the soundtrack to Rock and Roll High School, starring the
Yeah.
Ramones. And you could hear that song, and it's got a pop element, but it's got a very punk element. I mean, who's writing about high school? I mean, rock guys, at that point in time, in the 60s and early 70s, there was kind of like a hippie thing. And the MC5 and the Stooges were not hippies, and the Velvet Underground were not hippies, and the Dolls weren't hippies. So, you know, pop, there's some of that was in pop music, but also that album-oriented rock. A lot of the bands kind of this hippie thing, this psychedelic thing, and not the cool psychedelic that you'd get with some Hawkwind or Sabbath, but kind of jangly stuff. And then there's this prod stuff started happening, like Yes and King Crimson. That stuff was great, especially for musician heads and stuff. But the MC5, the Stooges weren't any of that. They were stripped down. They were lean. They weren't about flower power, and they weren't about this sort of proggy element, which was becoming popular with musicians. And that's why what they did is connected to the heavy metal to come out in the 70s, like Kiss or Nugent or Aerosmith. By the way, Nugent
Yeah.
and Amber Dukes are contemporaries of the MC5 and the Stooges in Detroit.
But you mentioned, hippies. Like, I know they're not hippies,
No,
but from my
they were
understanding,
in the cars, they were in
they're,
the motors,
but
and
they're also, yeah, for sure. But they're also a very political band. Am I
yes,
right?
yes, and that's also a component about much of early punk. When you hear the Pistols or the Dead Kennedys, definitely being political was an important part of that, and they were. So you brought up Back in USA, and I could see that there is. When I first heard it, it was the second album I heard from them. Yeah, it wasn't as wild as Kick Out the Jams. It wasn't as distorted, but there are some really aggressive, heavy, meaty riffs like Call Me Animal and Looking at You. But Kick Out the Jams, on the other hand, had this looseness and this element of that was, element of chaos, and a lot of the playing was wild. It was recorded live, and that has the elements that you could see in punk rock, that sort of careening out of control, chaotic energy, really emphasizing the energy over just proficient performance. But they were that. I mean, Wayne Kramer is like a guitar teacher in the way he approaches guitar. Fred Sonic Smith was a lot looser and wilder. They both, it's almost as if Wayne Kramer took the technical aspect of Hendrix, and Fred Sonic Smith took the feedback, light your guitar and fire element of Hendrix. They put them together and it just worked with the MC5. So
Yeah.
that's why I think they're important, because, and as I said, I learned about them reading about Kiss. It's like, here's where Kiss comes from, and they would refer to Stooges and Dolls and MC5.
So what about the MC5 and the Seattle sound? Like, how much do you think that this band influenced what was going on in the music scene in the 90s?
Definitely. Most journalists reference the Stooges, like the band Green River was often compared to the Stooges. I think because Mark had some physical and facial characteristics that maybe were reminiscent of Iggy Pop. But the Green River, I didn't think were Stooges-like at all. I thought they were very much like they had strong elements of the Dead Boys, especially on the album Dry as a Bone. And Mudhoney, the guys at Sub Pop marketed Mudhoney as being Stooges influence. Like, yeah, big, loud, fuzzy guitars, but musically, it didn't have that kind of repetitive, haunting Stooges groove. There was something else. So there were elements of MC5 and the Dead Boys and Blue Cheer in what, say, Mudhoney or Green River were doing. There were elements of the MC5 and what Soundgarden was doing, more so than the Stooges or the Dolls. So I would say the MC5 played a huge factor in influencing the energy, looseness, and wildness of many of the Seattle bands. Certainly when like Nirvana, I see more MC5 in Nirvana.
Yeah, I see that.
But the fact that the Stooges were constantly referenced, I think may have just been a tendency for journalists to repeat what was written in the press, in the press release.
Yeah.
And the Sub Pop guys, well, Bruce Pavitt would reference the Stooges a lot, but if you know the Stooges and you listen to Mudhoney or Green River or Tad or Nirvana, you're not going to hear much of that there. You will hear more MC5 or Blue Cheer or something.
I definitely hear this. I definitely hear, like Nirvana with the simplicity of the chords, like 3 or 4 chords, because that's how I learned how to play guitar. I learned how to play guitar playing Nirvana power chords, and it was so easy. And I think even up to their, their second major label release with In Utero, you still kind of hear MC5. But bringing it back to Soundgarden, like, I don't know if I hear it so much in the later records,
No.
but like how has this band influenced your playing, your writing, all of that? And did you guys ever like have a moment where you're like, this sounds like that, or I'm writing in the style of while doing a jam session?
I think it had to do with the way I played. Matt and I were having this conversation just 2 days ago. The elements in our band, Jack Endino, the producer who produced early Nirvana and Soundgarden, Mudhoney, and Tad, he had said back in the 80s when Hero was still in our band, he said, Matt makes you guys sound professional. Now, Jack had played with Matt in Skin Yard. They were in a band together. He goes, Matt is that kind of a player. He'll make you sound professional. He goes, Chris is going to make you guys commercial because of that voice and his sense of melody. Plus, and I didn't understand it then. I guess he's good looking.
You guys were buddies, so you probably just made fun of him and be like, "Shut up, you ugly motherfucker."
I just didn't see that until your friend's girlfriend say something. I was like, he's kind of cute. So Matt makes you guys professional. Chris makes you guys commercial. You and Hero make the band arty. And then that was extended when Hero left. When we got Ben in the band, Jack reiterated that it's the same formula. You guys are the arty ones who do all the weird kind of noisy, goofy things. And Matt makes everything sound good and makes it sound like, this is a professional band. And Chris makes it something that people enjoy hearing and perhaps sellable for record companies.
Sure, no, 100%.
So the MC5 had that component. They got a great singer, a soulful singer, Rob Tyner. And that's, when you said Nirvana, that's the first thing I thought about, because the difference between much of punk rock in the late 70s and early 80s is that it was emphasized, they would emphasize the energy, the composition of songs, louder, shorter, faster, louder.
Yeah.
And you get Kurt, who certainly comes from punk rock, as he comes from classic rock, as do the Soundgarden guys. But he can sing, and he's got quite a voice and quite an ear for melody. That's the MC5. They have a great singer and a soulful singer, beautiful voice, powerful voice. And then they have these raw guitar riffs, you know. And that first album, they play like they're on acid and drunk. It's very real, and it's very heavy, and it's the an element that I often find missing from rock is wildness and chaos. I think it's there in punk rock. I think it's in some metal bands. A lot of metal bands emphasize proficiency, like Iron Maiden, proficiency,
Oh my
twin
God,
guitar
yeah.
solos, all the notes in the right part. And that's a part of Soundgarden. It's like otherwise we wouldn't be doing things in weird tunings and weird time signatures. But there's this other part that Ben and I would bring to the table, and that's that part we would have gotten from listening to, you know, MC5 or the Dead Boys or Black Flag or the Meat Puppets, and that's that wildness that it's a combination of inability to play the same riff twice and also lack of desire to do so because of the short attention span. So if you take these kind of wild chaotic elements and you balance them with, say, the melodic and technical abilities of, say, a Rob Tyner or Chris Cornell, or the very scholastic and energetic abilities of Wayne Kramer on guitar, and then you have this looser, wilder guitarist, your Fred Sonic Smith, and you balance these elements. That first album leans more toward chaos and wild.
Yeah.
Kick out the jams. The one, and I think you're correct. Back in the USA, seems a little bit more organized, a little bit cleaner. So
Yeah, very much.
yeah, but they were both those bands. I mean, back in the USA, kind of, I definitely hear what I learned from Wayne Kramer playing with him with the MC50 tour, you know, well, the past few years. That first album, when we isolated some of the tracks to learn the songs, you could hear what Fred's playing, and that's definitely a Fred Sonic Smith record in what's going on. I think Soundgarden had those elements. I think Nirvana had those elements. There is some of that punk rock. There is some of the proficiency and progressive elements you might find in metal. And I think balancing those, like a lot of my favorite bands do that. They have those components. And it may have been something I learned from the MC5. It may have just been the beautiful happenstance that a guy like Matt wanted to play with me and Hero, or me and Hero formed a band with Chris, or, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I get it. I love how you keep saying the wildness of this record. I have one of my producers gets me this huge list of facts and quotes, and it has Wayne Kramer saying, and I heard this re-listening to this record today after reading this. He just says that we were inconsistent. All of a sudden, this was the night. It was a lot of pressure for us to be under. I hear it every time I listen to this record. I hear me making clumsy mistakes on guitar. I hear Dennis all over on the tempos. I hear Rob not quite in the perfect voice he was capable of. But like you said, it doesn't. I don't hear it. I just hear a fucking band going for it, and
Yeah.
you can feel the energy in there. Like,
I,
go ahead.
that producers don't like that, and and I know from playing with Wayne and his abilities technically that he strays away from that. I stray toward that.
Yeah.
And back in USA sounds like a producer got a hold of the MC5. You know what I mean?
Yes, dude, for sure. And there's nothing wrong with it. Like I said, it's not a bad record.
No,
I,
it's a cool record.
and I listened to that record first because it was on the list before this one, because obviously this one's much more important. And I was able to be like, oh no, I dig this, and I see it and I feel it, and it made me want to go and listen to this. And I did. I didn't study it like I did now. And I was like, okay, now I get it. And I think that if they put out the second record first and this second, I don't know if the band gets as much as
Right.
of all the love. This is a way to introduce them. They are not a studio band. It's everything. It's the elements. That's what really makes them special, because from my understanding, they don't have many more records after this. Am I right?
They have High Time, and High Time it doesn't have the glisten that Back in USA has. It doesn't have the wildness that
Kick out
Kick
the
Out the
jam.
Jams has, but it has a lot of really cool songs, a lot of great grooves. Uh, that I was just try something you just said. remi- I'll come back to there. Something you just said that reminded me about something about the producer. There seems it definitely there. Wayne definitely has that sensibility as both a guitarist and producer, and the MC5 wouldn't work without that leadership that Wayne brought to it. But you're also right about the chronology of the releases. There are a number of great punk rock bands whose first album was crazy and wild and noisy because they were on a budget. Maybe they self-produced it. And then they get popular and a producer comes in, or they have more money to spend. And the second record is a little bit slicker, but the
Yeah.
music and songwriting gets better. And I think about the Meat Puppets. The Meat Puppets' first album is so much like Kick Out the Jams in its wildness and looseness. And I love that record. And their second album comes out. It sounds like they've been listening to a lot of Neil Young and Grateful Dead and Jimi Hendrix, but it's an amazing record. It's beautiful. And it's the playing's tighter and the production's tighter, but both records are great. And the MC5 are like that. There's so many punk rock bands that did that. The first album's recorded on a budget. The next album, they spend a little bit more time in writing and recording, but it seems to work. And you're right. If it had been flipped, it
Yeah,
it
I
was
just don't know.
less convincing.
Yeah, I think this is a good debut. I think this captures everything that makes this band special. Like that, everything that Wayne said in that quote is because it's not like, dude, it does. It's if it was terrible, they wouldn't release it. You know what I
Right.
mean? It was good enough. They were tight enough, and even you could probably feel the nerves that they're having, knowing they're recording this as their debut because and that's what makes them push even harder, you know? Like did you ever have like a show with Soundgarden where it was like it was make or break in a sense and you had to go for it and you guys excelled past just how you normally had played?
There there definitely were some shows that carried more weight.
Yeah.
Perhaps or perhaps it was who we were playing with or opening for. Perhaps it was the fact it was on TV or it's being televised live or it was being recorded. Or there's some record company folks coming to the gig and we're
Yeah.
young, or we're playing with a band we really love. And there's definitely that weight and pressure. And we always, I believe, almost always hit it.
Yeah.
It, there's you can kind of plot performance on a bell curve against stress, and it's been done. And as stress increases, your performance increases, and it gets to a certain point where you get too much stress, and your performance starts going down. But it's shaped like a bell, right? Well,
Mhm.
look, I can't draw a bell here, but
I see
imagine
it. I see the bell. I see it.
so you can perform with stress and hit this level of performance. You can have way more stress, but you're going to have the
You're
same
gonna suffer.
performance but too much stress.
Yeah.
So we would get all this fucking stress and we kill it. And so it's probably just a combination of the way we work together. I think rather than taking all that stress and anxiety and weight and crumbling, we would kind of fight and it would come out. It'd be like bam, we just get. It's just kind of the nature of the personality of the guys in the band. We get angrier or just outwardly more aggressive rather than like withdraw and be a.
Did
And so it would come out the way we play. We kind of, if we were scared or nervous about a situation, we'd play at the situation. We'd play
yeah.
at the audience, and then eventually you come to be with them.
Was it having someone like Matt in the band that was so technically being able to like hone you guys in that you always knew that regardless of how much anxiety? Because I don't know from just meeting you, you don't seem like a person that has a lot of anxiety, but still, like you mentioned, there are shows that raise that. I just did two arenas opening for Burr, and I couldn't. I went from being I'm gonna kill it to I'm gonna bomb to I'm gonna kill it to just go have fun. And then once I hit that, like you said, the stress and the performance were so amplified, but it could have been, and comedy's even harder because you can let the instruments speak for you.
Yeah.
I've got to stay present and stay loose, because if I'm uptight, it's not going to work. But but to have, when you're doing it in a band, to have, like, certain members, were there shows that you can remember? What was the one for that you remember? Not the whole band, but just you, was probably, like, you're like, oh fuck, all right, this is it. Goddamn, all right, we gotta fucking do it.
Uh, Nothing. I can't think of a specific show. Nothing's coming to mind right now in terms of a specific show, but I do know of those situations. And yeah,
Yeah.
having Matt, tie your shoes while you're playing is pretty good. Um, you know, in our early days, we'd have some train wrecks, where you have a hard time hearing on stage. And most of the train wrecks originated from, me or Hero. You're playing in some club and there isn't much, the PA's all
Monitors suck,
outward,
yeah.
you're hearing echoing, and you get lost. You just kind of like you take one wrong turn. And we had some drummers back then where that might happen as well. The drummer might just miss a change, and everyone's like, was that me, or was that him, or was that him? And you miss, just say a drummer misses a change, and then you stay where you think you are, or you try to catch up, and you go to where the drummer is, and the drummer catches himself and comes back to where he's supposed to be, and now
Yeah.
everything just starts falling apart.
Oh
That
yeah.
happened a few times in our early days. Either I make a wrong turn or Hero would, and get a drummer make a wrong turn. Matt, like, almost never does. Uh,
He's Mr. Consistent.
there are a few times Chris did, mostly because it's tough to juggle both singing and playing guitar, or worse, in our early days, he had to sing and play drums, which would be really, really a tough
That's
thing to do. I
insane. Yeah.
can't imagine anyone doing it, but you got people like Chris and Dave Grohl and and Taylor Hawkins who have that ability and strength. So.
Yeah. Yeah. So, talking about, you mentioned it a few times, you got to play with the MC5 during the MC50 anniversary. How did that come about? Take us through that.
I'd met Wayne a few times. The first time was in the 90s. Soundgarden, this is kind of cool. Soundgarden was doing we were putting our hands in cement at some record store in Detroit. And the name is escaping me right now, but this is so cool. The, the promoter booked us. We were in town the same day they booked the MC5. So the MC5 are coming to put their hands, the surviving members. I believe Rob Tyner had passed away recently. The surviving members came to put their hands in cement, and Soundgarden was asked to come to the record store, put their hands in cement. Met Dennis Thompson and Mike Davis and Wayne Kramer then, and Fred Sonic Smith was at the store. I don't believe I might have been a bit nervous to say hi to him, but three of those guys, Mike, Dennis, and Wayne came to our show. Then after the show, Wayne came and sat in our dressing room. And he goes, I hear a lot of us and what you guys do. Just watching you guys, listening to you guys, I see us. I was like, good, because there's a lot of what you guys did that I incorporated into my thinking about rock and about my band. We exchanged numbers. He moved to Nashville. I didn't really, call one of your heroes. I didn't really do that. But then we connected again at other shows. And I think he did a tour of DTK, which were the three surviving members of the MC5, Thompson, Davis, and Kramer. And they did a tour with other singers, like I think Lanigan, Mark Arm, Evan Dando, and the other guitarists playing with them. And they were coming through Seattle. And like a week before they came to Seattle, Mark and Wayne called me. Mark knew that the MC5 was Mark Arm. Mark knew that the MC5 was one of my favorite bands. And I'd mentioned that to Wayne before. And they were in a hotel room. They called me. So we're doing this tour. We're going to be in town. And you want to come play some songs? Yes. I love it.
Yeah,
again, the nerves just went up. Like, oh,
there's that bell curve.
and they wanted me to play in a couple songs. And then when I got there, they asked me to play on 2 or 3 other songs that I hadn't rehearsed. I was like, I don't know how to play those. Oh, it'll be easy. It's like, no, I don't know how to play those. So I went up on stage and played a
Yeah,
handful of
yeah, yeah.
songs. And then they came through with Tom Morello and Wayne, who are both politically involved. They did a, what was that tour? It was, I can't remember what they called it, the Revolution Tour or whatever, but they did a tour that was uh, politically oriented. Wayne was working with a group that he started called Jail Guitar Doors, that brings guitars to prisoners and helps teach them music and stuff like that. And I believe that was on that tour. And Susan Silver, our longtime manager of Soundgarden, called me and Matt and Ben up and called us up and said, "Hey, would you guys like to do a few songs on this tour?" Wayne was asking and Tom was asking. He's like, "Yeah." So we got Tad from the band Tad Doyle to come and sing a couple Soundgarden songs, Spoon Man and Hunt It Down and something else. And then we did Kick Out the Jams. And we got to play with those guys. Again, the same thing, great vibes all around. Met a bunch of the people who were on that tour. Wayne kept me in mind. And then after the tragic, events around our last tour, Wayne decided to get something together to celebrate the 50th anniversary of Kick Out the Jams. And he was he at this point, he's one of two surviving members and the one who was interested in touring and promoting both a book he was working on and the anniversary of this classic influential album. He gets a band together with Marcus Durant from Zen Gorilla, Brendan Canty from Fugazi, and Doug Pinnick from King's X, myself, and they also had Matt Cameron fill in on some drum dates that Brendan couldn't make. And he called me, and it was, I was just in a daze still, like a year after we lost Chris.
Yeah.
Wayne called and said, "Hey, I'm getting a band together. Think you'd be interested in playing guitar? We want to do some tours and maybe do some recording." I was like, "Yeah," but then again, the stress and nerves went up, and the excitement went up, and it kind of kicked some life back into me. Just the idea of playing with my heroes, playing with one of my favorite bands, if not my favorite band. And there's a lot of weird irony in it because the tour was one of my favorite bands who was from Detroit, which of course where Soundgarden ended. And then the tour was going to culminate in Detroit. It was all going to go there. And so we returned to Detroit, celebrate the 50th anniversary of their first album, their first shows. The whole thing was really important and special and kind of got me this.
Oh my God, yeah.
Focus.
Yeah, I mean I completely understand what you said about being in the haze and the funk and just down and it's almost like the universe was telling to like pull you out of it by bringing this into
Totally
you.
thought that exactly.
Yeah,
it's totally what occurred to me. It's like, holy shit! It's like, this is weird. There's irony in it, and definitely some weird poetic components.
Oh, it's synchronistic for sure.
Yeah.
Oh my God. So what was that like? Just being like every night? Was it just, you're glowing or?
Yeah, it was, well, I was still, I was still, pretty melancholy, but
Sure.
the best hour and a half of every day was when I was on stage with those guys, and then after that, it was just kind of like still kind of spaced out in my own head. Then we'd go up there, we'd play. It was just like, wow. And it was there's this different enthusiasm. It was fun. I enjoyed the band and everyone who was playing in it. I thought this is great. It's the best hour and a half of every day.
Yeah.
Is playing this show. And that's odd because I didn't necessarily feel that way about other, tours or there's always this weird component of, like we talked about earlier, stress, performance, and sometimes when you finish a gig, it was a bit of a relief. Kind of just relax, came down, crack a beer, But this was kind of fun while it was going on. And it might be that the MC5 songs were easier to play than Soundgarden songs for me, you know.
You think? You think? I
So
mean,
I can relax and just kind of, you know,
yeah, dude, you can play 3 or 4 chords fast. I mean, just and then it's like, oh, yeah, I'm just gonna keep my grunge pedal on as loud as possible and crunch it up.
plus I love the songs. Um, yeah, it was like, hey, this is it had that energy that I like about just slashing and loose. So I could do that. I could do the Fred Sonic Smith, just kind of play slashing and loose, and Wayne would do Wayne's thing, which is more uh, proficient,
Yeah.
and it made a nice balance. I would really try to capture both the tightness and looseness of the MC5, much like Soundgarden has that component. You know,
Yeah. What was your favorite MC5 song to play live? Like what was the one you got excited about when you saw it coming up on the set list?
well, certainly kick out the jams.
For sure.
Rambling
That's an easy one to say. That's the go-to. Like, of course. All right, so we'll put that. I already kind of
Yeah,
figured that was going to be up there.
yeah.
But like,
Mhm.
what else were you digging on?
Rambling Rose, Call Me Animal, and Baby Won't Ya. Baby Won't Ya off of High Time. It's cool, stonesy, dark, but has a cool groove. But there were every song, most songs had some element or component that's just fun to kind of break out, you know. But those are ones where I look down and go, all right, Call Me Animal's coming up. And that was it was very fun to play. Trying to think of what else. Just those in Sister Ann got to be fun to play. You know, it's that's the first. I believe that's the first song on High Time. What do I? I don't remember. It kicks off one of the sides, and that had a lot of, you know, that was definitely a lot of fun. There's certain riffs are just that just seem second nature. You know, you pick up guitar, and the MC5 captured a lot of those.
Yeah. No,
Definitely, that's definitely cool, you know.
I mean, it sucks. It's one of those things where it's like, and I don't know if they're going to go back on another tour. Do you know if they're ever going to try to do
I think
something
they
like
are.
that again?
I think Wayne got another band together. I think, you know, we did some recording in Detroit live. We recorded one of our shows at Third Man, and I think Wayne wrote a bunch of material with another singer and decided, hey, there's some stuff here. Maybe we should record it. And I think he got together with Bob Ezrin, you know, who did
Oh
Kiss the
yeah.
Destroyer and all those Alice Cooper records. We toured with Alice Cooper in the UK and in Australia, New Zealand, uh, 2019, 2020. And so through that connection, Wayne connected with Bob Ezrin and started writing with this singer. And Bob said, hey, there could be, there's definitely a cool record here. So Wayne recruited since he's working with a new singer and writing new stuff, he recruited another band. And he asked me and Billy Gould from Faith No More, who played most of this tour. Originally they got Doug Pinnick from King's X, but Billy Gould from Faith No More did 90% of the touring. And he called Billy and and I think we were both down to make a record, but it was in the middle of the pandemic, so we were both hesitant to commit to a tour.
Yeah.
And I think Brendan Canty, the drummer, is teaching film somewhere in the DC area, I think Georgetown or something.
Oh wow.
So it's just, you know, so at that point, when he's trying to find some commitment, he just got a new band together. And I think Steve Perkins from Jane's Addiction is drumming, which is
I could see that.
yeah.
I could see that.
So,
We had him on, and he's got that rock and roll spirit. I could see him being able
yeah.
to play these songs. Yeah.
He's definitely got a great positive energy and
Very positive.
drumming, and his personality. He's a great guy.
Oh, for sure.
So I think they are playing some shows. Yeah.
I would love to get this. Right now, I'm at that place in my life. I go to concerts any night. I don't have shows. Like I went to see Mars Volta last night. I'm gonna go see him again tonight. Do you know Cedric or Omar?
Yeah, we toured with them. They did 2 weeks with, I think it was 2 weeks with us in after we reunited in 2010. It would have been, I'm trying to remember. I think King Animal was out. So sometime between 2012 2014, we toured with them. I'd met Omar a few times at some other shows, but he may not have. I just said hi. But I
Yeah.
think I talked to Cedric the most. But I was a fan of the Mars Volta, and I remember turning Matt on to it. He dug it. He just dug their drummer, and
Oh yeah,
had
it was John
there are elements
Theodore.
of them that there are elements of them that reminded me of Santana and Hawkwind, and a lot of other things. And it had this sort of the cool psychedelic element, trippy and exploring things. And they had that kind of proficiency in their musicianship, as well as kind of this freedom. That's another term besides just chaos or wildness or
Freedom.
crazy or noise. It's freedom, and freedom can encompass those elements like chaos, noise, wildness. And I don't think I used the term noise before, but that's an important component of much of punk rock. I mean, the No New York movement in the late 70s, early 80s, bands like James White, the Contortions, and Mars, and DNA, or then later Sonic Youth and Live Skull, the Swans. There's definitely noise component to kick out the jams, and that may come from I have to mention this, a special love that the guys in the MC5 had for free jazz. They were really, I mean, the guys in the studios, I mean, Iggy Pop, Rob Tyner, Wayne Craner, Fred Sonic Smith, they're listening to Sun Ra. They're listening to Ornette Coleman, Eric Dolphy, Albert Eiler. And when I was a teenager, my best friend was this, he still is my best friend. He plays all reeds and saxes. He's listening to Sun Ra and Ornette Coleman, Albert Ayler, and Eric Dolphy, and he's turning me on to this. I'm like, that's weird jazz shit. Listen to this. I bring my Ramones record in, and my Voidoids, my Dead Boys. He goes, oh, that's stupid punk rock shit. And that kept on going for a couple of years. We were turning each other on to shit and cutting each other's record collection down. We kind of met it like, we kind of agreed on like Rush, or King Crimson.
Yeah. I love that you brought up the Sun Ra thing. I love that you brought up the word freedom, because man, that like, it even makes more sense now after listening to it, and like to go back and hearing that they were into Sun Ra and Ornette Coleman, because go ahead.
That's where I was going before we were.
Yeah, for sure.
Before the knock at the door.
Fucking
was
HVAC, dude.
My best friend, jazz guy, sax guy, and me, punk rock guitar guy. I'm looking at the MC5 Kick Out the Jams. I'm reading the back. I'm reading the credits. They're all MC5 songs. The last song, Starship. I'm looking at that. It says songwriting credits, Sun Ra, MC5. I'm like, what? Just Sun Ra and MC5. And I go and I show that to my buddy Brad. I go, looks like the MC5 wrote a song with Sun Ra, or they're covering a Sun Ra song. And he looked and he goes, huh. And now our ridicule of each other's record collection takes on a whole new dimension.
Yeah, dude.
We put that song on and we listened to it over and over again. And Brad's like, yeah, that could be like a Sun Ra type thing. And I'm like, whoa. And then there ends up being this great article in Musician magazine in the late 70s. And I'd love to find it, or find that issue. In it, the article was called The Free Jazz Punk Rock Connection. And they talked about Lester Bowie and the Art Ensemble of Chicago. They talked about the Stooges and the MC5 and their affinity for Albert Eiler and Ornette Coleman and Sun Ra. They talked about Captain Beefheart and their background with jazz and their use of pseudonyms, and how pseudonyms became a thing with the Sex Pistols, the Beefheart had Antenna Jimmy Siemens and Zoot Horn Rollo, and the Pistols had Johnny Rockman, Sid Vicious, and how that was a part of the culture, and about how punk rock was informed by free jazz as much as it was by these early proto punk bands like the MC5 Stooges. It was a really cool article drawing these things together. And now my best friend and I kind of look at each other and go, so we're not that far off, I guess. We start trading records with each other.
I am you and you are me. We are one.
We're the egg people. So our 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 musical acumen just expands. He starts listening to punk rock records. I start listening to his jazz records. We kind of meet at the No New York thing, the Contortions, James White and the Blacks, the Voidoids, and it was just a great. It was an epiphany to both see that the MC5 did, that they, and it turned out they played shows with Sun Ra. We started seeing pictures of these old posters. It's, where Sun Ra and the MC5 were playing together. So that connection and seeing that song in the back of Kick Out the Jams, along with just finding that article in Musician Magazine, it was really opened a lot of stuff up and how I'd listen and appreciate, rock music and what I was doing.
I love it. I love it. We have a couple of Patreon questions and we're going to do the final rundown and get you out of here. I could talk to you for hours, man. You rule, dude. You rule. You rule. And fuck your HVAC guy, dude. There's one, dude, anybody listening, all the fans, I want you to write hashtag fuck HVAC guy when you tag us, okay? Fuck HVAC. Spell it however you want. Figure out your own way. I don't even, was it like HVAC?
To tell you the truth, those guys are they're doing their best. I've met those HVAC guys are great. I blame management for not coordinating these things well.
Fuck HVAC. Yeah. All right. Fuck HVAC management.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's hashtag fuck HVAC management. Yeah. Just so we can clear it up. We're for the proletariat. We're for the workers.
Yes.
It's the people in charge. Yeah. Always. Yeah. So this is a question from our buddy Matt in Canada. Like, are garage bands like the MC5 alive and well?
Are bands that are inspired or that are of the same mold as the MC5?
Yeah, that's what I think I'm getting from it.
There's still that component. You'll see that in indie rock and underground rock. I think punk rock is still out there, still influencing, young musicians, and people are still going to get in their garage, usually the drummer's garage, because he has his kit all set up, right?
Always.
And the guitars go to the drummer's parents' house when they're out of town, and they'll jam. And there's that combination of fun and ability and inability and unpredictability that all kind of comes together. And at that point, when you start liking it, that's what you got to keep doing. And and you'll like it before you're good at it. So that's perfectly all right, as long as you're having fun and enjoying it. I think there'll constantly be bands like that, but they don't get too digital and too far into sampling, which nothing wrong with that. There's some cool shit.
No, not at all.
Sampling and digital stuff, brilliant stuff.
No, not at all. I completely agree. But I love that you said the thing about the drummer. It's like we went to Tassos's house. He had it set up. He was Greek. His mom would be like, "I feed everybody." So we'd always go there. We'd eat our asses off, and then we'd jam for 3.5 hours. All right, let's do the rundown, and then we'll get you out of here. All right, so we ask these questions to everybody. What's your favorite song on this record?
Kick Out the Kick Out Jams.
Kick Out the Jams, yeah.
God, that thing kind of morphs over the years, but it probably has to be Kick Out the Jams. And if you ask me at a different year, it might have been Rambling Rose, or Rocket Reducer.
I just think Kick Out the Jams. Look, the whole record's brilliant, but Kick Out the Jams is a song that just it has so much meaning. There's so much power behind it, and I think it's also the fact that it was one of the first songs to say fuck, and it's a groundbreaking song that is one of the main reasons we're talking about this record.
Yes, it is one of the first songs to do that, but that's a good point too. I think the whole album says fuck, and there's something about that energy and about the fact that it doesn't abide by the rules, even the rules of three-chord musicianship. It kind of skirts that too. The whole thing kind of says fuck. It's standing on stage and flipping off the world. It's something cool about that.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. Is there any in that song, I usually say what song do you dislike, but is there any songs on this record that you skip over that just don't really get you?
For years I skipped over the Sun Ra one because it was lengthy and there's parts I didn't get. I was a teenage kid with a guitar. I listen to it much more these days. You know, another song off that album that's super fun to play is "I Want You Right Now." It's just these three powerful chords. It's kind of heavy, and it's kind of fun to play because it's just bashing the guitar and bending notes, and that's a good one too. But I think, yeah, I think for a long time I'd skip over the MC5 one. It's like, it sounds like shit, but grab it.
You know, I don't really, I think this is, I don't, you know, when you're talking about a studio record, that's one thing, because then you can be like, all right, well, I like these four. They loaded it up like this. Like, this is an event. This feels like you're listening to a moment in time. And I feel all of it is one piece, even though, you know, the song ends and the next one starts. It's not like just a full concert at certain points, but it's something that I don't think you want to skip over it. It's like you have to just listen, put it on at the beginning and let it ride. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? And that's why I dig it. All
you,
right.
you are right. Yeah.
All right. Now I ask this to everybody. It's a two-part question. One, can you fuck to this record? And two, if you have to pull out one song to add to your sex playlist, what song are you pulling out?
I don't know if I ever had a girlfriend who liked this record, so that'd be kind of abusive, wouldn't it? Put this record on.
It's
What
not.
dim the light, dim the black light, you know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
This isn't making love. This is a fucking record. If you're gonna have to do anything, you gotta fuck to it. She's gotta be she's gotta be down,
I
down.
I don't think I'm that assaulted.
I
um, maybe I Want You Right Now off of this record.
would say that too. I don't think it's a fuckable album, but I would pull out "I Want You Right Now." And then the last question is, what would be your elevator pitch to get somebody to listen to this album?
Your record collection's too clean. This is this is rock and roll. Stop listening to what you think will make your mom
Dude, that
happy, or your
rules.
teacher happy.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, you're right. You're right. You're 100% right. Dude, you rule. Promote away. Anything you want to promote? Anything you got coming up that you want do you want everybody to know about?
You know, Matt and Chris Novoselic and I have been Matt Cameron, Chris Novoselic and I have been playing with this project called The Third Secret, and it involves a singer named Jillian Ray and guitarist Bubba Dupree, who was the guitarist of a great, seminal hardcore band from DC called Void. If you ever have a chance, listen to the Split Faith Void album that came out, I believe, in '82 or '83. And Bubba he lives out here in Seattle, been playing with Matt and Chris and I and Jillian, and we get together once in a while and go over, write some songs and do some recording. And Chris released, just self-released, no promotion, no manager, no record label, just put it out there for streaming. So if you were to Google The Third Secret, you'll find it streaming, and there might be some videos out there that we shot that's
Nice.
streaming as well. And that's that. Like, it's like a no record industry record.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I'm going to check it out as soon as we're done with this. Kim, thank you. Thank you
Thank
again for
you.
coming on, man. I appreciate it.